Do you believe in instant transformation? Imagine, the most brilliant minds of the ancient world once entered a mysterious room in a coastal town 18 miles west of Athens, partook in a strange drink, and then they emerged completely changed. Illustrious names like Plato, Cicero, and Marcus Aurelius all experienced this. Absolutely none of them uttered a single word about what transpired behind that door. For nearly 2 millennia, this secret remained deeply buried, until 2021, when a laboratory in Barcelona finally unveiled the mystery. The sanctuary of Eleusis operated continuously from approximately 15 BCE. Yes, you heard that right. From 15 BCE until 396 CE. For over 4 continuous centuries, these rituals attracted the participation of every emperor, philosopher, and great general the ancient Mediterranean world ever produced. This ritual was known as the Eleusinian Mysteries, and the supreme rule governing it was absolute secrecy. The initiates, also known as Mysti, were bound by a death oath, never to reveal anything that transpired within that sacred hall. Under Athenian law, revealing this secret was considered a capital offense, equivalent to blasphemy. The clearest proof is that in 415 BCE, General Alcibiades was condemned to death and had his property confiscated in absentia, partly for allegedly holding a private parody of the mysteries at a dinner party. He was permanently unable to return to Athens. The secrecy here was not merely an abstract concept, it was a strictly enforced rule. At the heart of the ritual was a mysterious drink called kykeon, concocted from water, mint, and barley. Officially described, it sounds quite simple, like a cleansing drink you might find at a wellness retreat. However, in 1978, a major turning point occurred when chemist Albert Hofmann, the first to synthesize LSD, collaborated with classical scholar Carl Ruck and ethnomycologist Gordon Watson to publish a book titled The Road to Eleusis. Their argument was highly specific and scientific. The barley used in kykeon was almost certainly infected with ergot fungus Claviceps purpurea, a fungus containing ergot, a chemical compound structurally similar to LSD. In fact, hallucinogenic experiences caused by ergot-infected grains have been widely documented throughout European history. So, what if those experiences weren't accidental? What if they themselves were the center of all purpose? For decades, this notion was regarded as nothing more than an intriguing hypothesis. However, in 2021, a breakthrough emerged. A peer-reviewed study in Scientific Reports, led by González Escrig and colleagues, analyzed residue from a ceramic cup. This cup was discovered at Mas Castelar de Pontos, Spain, a sanctuary deeply connected to the Eleusinian tradition. And the results were astonishing. They confirmed the presence of ergot alkaloids, a potent hallucinogenic compound, right in the ritual cup found at that very Eleusinian site. The telesterion, the majestic ritual hall, could accommodate up to 3,000 participants at a single time. It is recorded as the largest single-roofed structure to have ever existed in all of ancient Greece. Everything that transpired within was experienced by a large collective, and remarkably, their testimonies, though filtered through later philosophical works, showed astonishing consistency. In his work Phaedo, Plato recorded that those who had undergone the initiation rites were able to face death without fear, for they had witnessed things beyond the mortal realm. Cicero also affirmed that Eleusis had bestowed upon him not only a way to live a tranquil life, but also a firm hope when facing death. These words are clearly not the descriptions of people who merely witnessed a theatrical performance. On the contrary, these are the accounts of individuals who experienced something truly profound and impactful. According to traditional interpretations, these mystery rites skillfully combined fasting, dramatic theatrical staging, sophisticated lighting effects, and the powerful psychology of collective initiation to create genuine religious experiences. Researchers have pointed out that sensory deprivation, emotional psychological preparation, and group ritual performance are well-documented methods for inducing altered states of consciousness. They assert that the experience was real, but its underlying mechanism was purely psychological, not due to the effects of psychoactive substances. However, this explanation forces us to accept something incredible: that Plato, a philosopher who dedicated his life to constructing the most rigorous and logical philosophical system the ancient world had ever known, found unshakable metaphysical certainty merely from stage lighting and an empty stomach. Furthermore, it requires us to explain why Cicero would go to such lengths to travel to a small town near Athens, only to experience things he could have found in any other Greek theater. And most importantly, we now need to clarify why ergot alkaloids were present in the ritual cup, even after Emperor Theodosius ordered the destruction of the sanctuary in 396 AD. His envoys did not stop at merely destroying the architectural structures. The hereditary priestly families, including the Eumolpidae and Characes, had carefully preserved written records of the ritual content for generations. However, those precious documents were ultimately confiscated and mercilessly destroyed. Let's revisit the haunting observation of the philosopher Eunapius, who recorded it not long after the event. He did not consider it a mere religious reform, but a true civilizational catastrophe, an undeniable destruction. And it is precisely here that archaeology has posed a challenging question that we cannot avoid. What if the most solid foundation of ancient philosophy, a confident assertion about the soul's existence after death, turned out to be merely the result of a chemically induced experience, orchestrated on demand by a powerful priestly lineage? During those crowded ceremonies, what did they truly know, and what were the motives behind it? Was the first act of the new religious order, upon gaining power, a systematic campaign to destroy all evidence, all records that could reveal this truth? Let's turn back time to when the Spanish conquistadors set foot in Tenochtitlan and witnessed the legendary Aztec Tzompantli. In 1519, amidst the chaos of the conquest, a soldier under Hernán Cortés, Andrés de Tapia, paused before a strange structure and began a chilling task: counting. The counting seemed endless, and the final number he reported sent shivers down one's spine: 136,000 human skulls. However, his detailed account was doubted and buried for 500 years. For centuries, historians dismissed it, considering it a wild exaggeration. Yet, in 2017, a groundbreaking excavation began right beneath modern Mexico City. The sacred precinct of ancient Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire, turned out to be hidden right beneath the colonial-era streets of downtown Mexico City today. More precisely, it lies directly beneath the bustling intersection of República de Guatemala and República de Argentina streets. This historic excavation project was led by the renowned archaeologist Leonardo López Luján from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History. And what they discovered throughout the excavation process from 2015 to 2020 was the Huizumpantle, the colossal skull rack that history had recorded. It was located precisely where Spanish records had indicated, and its form was almost identical to what they had described. The massive cylindrical skull tower structure, known as a huatapara, had an estimated diameter of up to 35 meters. In just a small section of the excavated area, López Luján's team horrifyingly uncovered over 650 skulls, each firmly affixed to the structure with lime and stucco. Estimating the overall scale of this structure is truly a chilling calculation. A shocking discovery from forensic bone analysis revealed an unexpected truth. Approximately 75% of the skulls found belonged to adult males. However, that number still left a significant gap. The remaining 25% were women, children, and other individuals. Their presence in the tower completely disproved the popular hypothesis that it contained only warrior captives from battlefield sacrifices. However, when isotope analysis was performed on the teeth, a completely different story began to unfold. This is because the chemical composition of tooth enamel acts as a natural diary, accurately recording where an individual grew up, through the distinctive mineral signatures from water and soil sources throughout their childhood. Remarkably, many of the skulls found in the Tzompantli bore clear signs of distant, non-local geographical origins. Clearly, these were not indigenous captives. They had been brought to Tenochtitlan from across Mesoamerica, from lands so distant that it would have taken weeks of special travel solely for this purpose. The logistical scale behind this operation revealed a continent-wide supply network, something that Spanish accounts seem to have failed to fully convey. The Florentine Codex, a valuable document compiled by the Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagun from Aztec sources in the 1560s, described the Tzompantli ritual with astonishing liturgical precision. This document delved into the minutest details, from the specific role of the officiating priest, the designated calendar days, to the exact placement of the victims' bodies throughout the execution process. Clearly, this was not an impromptu or arbitrary act. Everything was meticulously organized and managed. Every ritual adhered to a predetermined schedule. Today, these findings and interpretations are widely accepted by scholars and considered undeniable truths. According to the dominant interpretation, the Tzompantli is seen as a core expression of the Aztec sun god religion, particularly that of Huitzilopochtli. The sun god was believed to require blood to rise each morning. Therefore, the display of skulls was not only a profound theological statement, but also a powerful political declaration, a clear demonstration of Aztec military might to all visiting dignitaries and subjugated peoples. The colossal scale was the key factor. Indeed, terror was employed as an effective tool of governance. However, there is a crucial aspect that this perspective still cannot fully explain. After the Spanish conquest, Viceroy Antonio de Mendoza ordered the systematic burning of Aztec pictorial codices, aiming to eradicate this cultural heritage. Since the 1520s, out of an estimated 400 to 500 codices believed to exist at the time of the Spanish arrival, sadly, fewer than 20 survive to this day. Subsequently, this crucial archaeological site was built over, first by a colonial church, then by centuries of urban infrastructure development, burying all physical evidence and rendering it inaccessible for 500 years. And throughout that half-millennium, the true scale of what had been described was consistently downplayed and misrepresented in mainstream academic studies. Imagine a colossal number, 136,000, once considered an undeniable truth, now revealed as a blatant exaggeration. The legendary towering structure turned out to be a modest edifice, and even more astonishingly, the women and children, the supposed victims, have been completely erased from history. And then, the groundbreaking excavation in 2017 didn't just confirm those suspicions. It also exposed a horrifying truth. The initial estimates were fundamentally flawed from their very origin. Now, what troubles researchers is no longer the actual number of skulls in the tower, but a deeper mystery. Why did it take 5 centuries for this truth to come to light? The disappearance of this evidence was not the result of a sudden dramatic act of destruction. On the contrary, it was a slow, organized, and incredibly effective process. The remnants of a colonial church were deliberately piled on top, obscuring all traces. And the consensus, or rather the silence, of the academic community did the rest. The skull tower is real, its scale undeniable, but for 500 years it seems some force has tried to hide this truth from you. Capacocha, a little girl just 6 years old. She was dressed in the most exquisite woolen garments, the pinnacle of textile art that the great Inca Empire could produce. For months, she was given coca leaves to chew, and then she endured a weeks-long trek, traversing the treacherous passes of the Andes to reach a towering peak 22,000 feet above sea level. At that altitude, the air becomes too thin, making it difficult for most adults to function normally, and the biting cold at night could easily claim a life. At the summit, she was given a final cup of chicha beer, then placed in a small stone chamber and sealed inside. When she was discovered in 1999, her face remained perfectly preserved, every eyelash intact, and her expression, even now, radiates an uncanny serenity. What is truly thought-provoking is not how she passed away, but what those who brought her there did to her for an entire year. 3 children, named by researchers as the Maiden, the Boy, and the Lightning Girl, were found on Mount Uyayaco in Salta Province, Argentina. They were discovered by archaeologist Johann Reinhard in March 1999 during a National Geographic-sponsored expedition. Radiocarbon dating results indicate that their deaths occurred around 15 AD. Did you know that these pre-Columbian mummies are not only perfectly preserved, but also not rare occurrences? In fact, they serve as crucial data points within a vast, continent-spanning ritual system known as Capacocha. In 2013, a research team led by Andrew Wilson published a groundbreaking analysis in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, focusing on tracing the chemical signatures hidden within each strand of these children's hair. Throughout the last year of their lives, their hair grew at a scientifically well-defined rate. Each centimeter of hair, in essence, is a miniature time machine. However, what this analysis revealed was not a single last-minute sedative dose. Instead, it was a systematic, escalating program that spanned a full 12 months. The amount of coca consumed increased significantly throughout this final year, and alcohol also began to be introduced into their systems in the final weeks. By the time these children reached the culmination of the ritual, their neurochemical systems had been thoroughly and deliberately altered. All of this unfolded over 365 days of pharmacological preparation, meticulously administered in stages. This was not an act of mercy, but a meticulously calculated process. Someone must have possessed sufficiently profound knowledge to execute this process flawlessly and precisely. They knew that a year-long, escalating regimen of coca and alcohol would induce a particular psychological state in a child. A state of docility, altered, physically present at the ritual, but neurologically completely detached from fear. Remarkably, this maiden showed no signs of physical trauma whatsoever. The cause of death was determined to be hypothermia, while in a deeply sedated state. The Lightning Girl, only 6 years old at the time, was interred with 36 distinct artifacts, each carrying special significance. Among them were exquisite gold and silver figurines, testament to her careful selection for absolute physical perfection. Completely unblemished, free from illness, and without any minor physical flaws. The most precious offering the Inca Empire could make was the elaborate preparation for the chosen girl. The Capacocha ritual was not a localized practice. According to the Spanish colonial chronicler Cristobal de Molina, around 1575, this ritual required direct approval from the Sapa Inca himself. The transportation of the children was carried out along the vast network of royal roads, requiring close coordination with regional governors across the empire. To date, over 100 Capacocha-related burial sites have been discovered, spanning the Andes, from Peru through Chile to Argentina, at astonishing altitudes of 17,000 to 22,000 feet. Each site required a custom-designed ascent route, supply chain, and ritual infrastructure. According to popular belief, Capacocha was considered the ultimate offering, holding the highest value in the Inca cosmological system. These children were not considered victims. On the contrary, Inca culture revered them as sacred gifts, elevated to divine status, escorted to the mountain deities, and believed to continue existing in a sacred form. Even after death, the meticulousness of their burial, the quality of their attire and accompanying offerings, along with the gentleness of the sedation methods, all attest to a culture that believed it was honoring, not harming, these children. However, what many find difficult to readily accept is the astonishing pharmacological precision applied. The 12-month preparation process was not merely an expression of kindness for a predetermined ritual. It was, in fact, a carefully calculated technical procedure. Someone within the Inca priesthood had accumulated a vast body of empirical knowledge in pediatric pharmacology, enough to devise a year-long neuropreparatory program and disseminate it effectively across a continent-spanning empire. However, that invaluable knowledge was later systematically destroyed through the administrative reforms of Viceroy Francisco de Toledo in the 1570s. These reforms specifically aimed to suppress Andean religious records, to prevent the continuation of indigenous ritual traditions. While the frozen children remain intact, the detailed process of getting them to the mountaintop is almost entirely lost. The only remaining artifacts are hair, 2 centimeters of coca leaves, and a small amount of chicha. And it is this deliberate preparation that reveals that whoever designed this ritual possessed a profound understanding of the human mind, something that modern science, with its chemistry and Ephra's necromantean, is only just beginning to measure. You have endured 3 days of severe fasting. You were only allowed beans, lard, and seafood, foods the priests claimed would open your mind, connecting you to the world of the departed. You have been confined to a windowless room, long enough to lose all sense of time, no longer distinguishing day from night. Now, a cloaked figure guides you deeper into a cold stone corridor, faintly smelling of sulfur and steam. You pass through 12 locked bronze doors, one after another, each slamming shut behind you, propelling you further into the deepening gloom ahead. Something mysterious is stirring. A familiar voice seems to be echoing. This reality is not a terrifying nightmare. For over 4 centuries, a powerful institution shaped northwestern Greece. In 167 BCE, when the Roman general Aemilius Paulus gave the order, he didn't merely end its existence. He burned everything to its foundations, burying it completely under the rubble. The Necromantion, also known as the Oracle of the Dead, was located in ancient Aphara, on a high hill overlooking the confluence of the Acheron and Cocytus rivers, rivers that the ancient Greeks identified as gateways to the underworld. This geographical location was no mere coincidence. According to Greek cosmology, the entrance to Hades was precisely located at the confluence of these two rivers. This sanctuary was an architectural masterpiece, embodying that profound belief, designed to transform the promise of myth, the ability to communicate with the dead, into a tangible experience. This area has been excavated by Greek archaeologists. Between 1958 and 1964, Sotirios Dikaris discovered a multi-level underground complex. He believed it comprised stone corridors, a central hall identified as the Hall of Persephone, and an inner sanctum accessible only through a series of 12 bronze doors. The preparation rooms adjacent to the corridors held an astonishing discovery: a large quantity of lupin seeds. Lupin seeds contain alkaloids, notably lupinine and spartine. At sufficiently high concentrations, these can cause disorientation, alter the perception of time, and induce hallucinatory states. Along with lupin seeds, charred barley, fava beans, and pig bones were found, a peculiar combination that later classical writers described as the mandatory diet for anyone wishing to commune with the underworld. Dikaris also discovered a bronze crane mechanism within the inner sanctum. He interpreted this as a theatrical lifting device, perfect for lowering or raising robed figures in complete darkness, simulating the emergence of spirits. This area was situated directly above a system of natural limestone caves. The geological structure of the bedrock allowed for the low-level emission of gases, including hydrogen sulfide. At sufficiently high concentrations, this gas can cause dissociation, visual disturbances, and alter the perception of time. A similar effect was noted by geologist Jelle de Boer at the Oracle of Delphi. Both Herodotus and Pausanias described the Necromantion as a sacred site where supplicants could receive messages from the deceased. After a preparation period lasting several days, the Spartan general Pausanias is said to have sought out this place to receive a message from the spirit of a woman he had murdered. Forget the rumors. This isn't some fringe myth, but a real, functioning institution, confirmed by countless independent sources from ancient Greece and Rome, with a clear, transparent address and operational procedures. According to popular belief, the ritual of necromancy was often perceived as an incredibly sophisticated and complex form of religious theater. The priests of that era skillfully combined many elements, from sensory deprivation and dietary control to elaborate staging and the use of complex theatrical devices. All of this was aimed at creating experiences so real that, for ancient people whose minds were already shaped by mythology, they truly resembled genuine supernatural communication. Its effectiveness was not unexpected, precisely because the unique psychological framework of the ancient Greeks created the conditions that allowed these rituals to have maximum impact. The human brain tends to fill in gaps with what it is prepared to receive and believe. The Romans raised this place not because of theological threats, but because it was considered a prophetic center that was extremely politically dangerous to their power. However, a clear distinction must be made between a mere theatrical performance and a true technology. To enjoy theater, the audience must willingly suspend their disbelief and accept what is happening. Yet what is described in the design of necromantic rituals is entirely different. It's a combination of multiple mechanisms operating simultaneously, creating a complex system. From pharmacology and geology to sensory-affecting elements and even theatrical techniques, each individual element could easily be dismissed as a mere coincidence. However, when all are intentionally combined, they form a complete and coherent system. Lupin beans, for example, have the ability to specifically affect brain activity. Similarly, certain gases are also known to significantly impact brain function. Fasting and living in complete darkness for 3 consecutive days also produce specific and profound effects on the state of the brain. Even the use of bronze doors combined with absolute darkness was designed to induce certain effects on neural activity. Clearly, someone, or a group of people, meticulously designed all these input elements to work in harmony, continuously refining that combination through generations of practice and experimentation. The ultimate goal was to produce a highly repeatable outcome, observable in the vast majority of participants. Therefore, this was not merely a play. It was, in fact, a sophisticated technology developed to create a specific and intentional neurological experience. The Roman general ordered this place to be burned and buried under rubble, an act believed to stem from more than just purely political motives. One never buries a mere theater. One only buries things that possess truly terrifying power and efficacy. Believe it or not, right on Vatican Hill, in what is now sacred Rome, the mysterious traces of an ancient ritual, the Taurobolium, still persist. Imagine, you are treading upon the very ground most revered in the Christian world. Yet few realize that deep beneath the massive foundations of St. Peter's Basilica, beneath the remains of emperors and popes, lies a unique layer of earth. This very spot once bore witness to something entirely different. An ancient altar, a deep pit exquisitely carved into the hillside and etched deep into the solid rock. Just above the mouth of that pit, ancient Latin inscriptions were once carved, bearing the meaning, "reborn for eternity." Remarkably, these words were not merely forgotten by the early church, but were deliberately chiseled off the original rock. In fact, these inscriptions were originally tied to a completely different ritual, initially promising a resurrection entirely unrelated to Christian beliefs. For 4 centuries, these inscriptions remained on Vatican Hill, until some force decided that the promise of resurrection could exclusively belong to a single religion, and used chisels to thoroughly erase them from the rock. That ritual was the Taurobolium. The Taurobolium was the core initiation rite of the cult of Cybele, also known as Magna Mater, the Great Mother. The worship of this goddess was officially introduced to Rome in 204 BCE. Remarkably, this was done by decree of the Roman Senate itself, based on a prophecy from the Sibylline oracles amidst the fierce backdrop of the Second Punic War. Clearly, this was no ordinary or obscure cult. In fact, this was a mystery religion that enjoyed official state patronage. This was the first foreign cult in all of Roman history to be officially recognized and approved. And even more astonishing, this cult continuously existed and operated on Vatican Hill for over 5 centuries. The most detailed and complete descriptions of this ritual were recorded by the Christian writer Prudentius. He recorded these details around 400 CE in his famous work Peristephanon. According to the description, an initiate would descend into a deep pit dug directly into the earth. Just above the mouth of that pit, a giant bull was led onto a special platform made of perforated wooden planks. The priests would then raise their sharp knives. In the moments that followed, the fresh red blood of the bull, which ancient sources describe as gushing like a waterfall, would flow through the perforated planks, cascading down onto the person below. Imagine this scene, a person looking up at the stream, their gaze fixed and unwavering. As soon as they emerged from the deep pit, soaked from head to toe, the witnessing crowd unanimously hailed them as renatus in aeternum, meaning reborn eternally. Remarkably, this phrase has been discovered on numerous altars on Vatican Hill and on ancient inscriptions at the Palatine Hill Temple, which are still carefully preserved in the Vatican Museum's precious epigraphic collection. The dates inscribed on these carvings range from 160 AD to 390 AD, indicating that the Taurobolium ritual continued to be performed on Vatican Hill even within a decade after Emperor Theodosius I officially declared Christianity the sole legal religion of the entire Roman Empire. Theological competition is not just a story of the distant past. In fact, it's a dynamic that continues to unfold in the present. And what happened next? The answer is clearly etched on the ancient stone slabs themselves. Notably, at least 11 Taurobolium altar inscriptions found on Vatican Hill have revealed clear evidence of deliberate defacement. It wasn't the altars themselves that were destroyed. They remained intact. Rather, it was the dedicatory inscriptions, particularly the names of Cybele and Attis, the sacred names of Cybele and Attis. The name of the goddess's consort was completely erased from the stone surface, while the overall stone structure remained perfectly preserved. This is clearly a characteristic sign of official erasure, rather than the result of natural decomposition over time. A name is only erased when there is an intent to assert that the identity now belongs to a different individual or entity, no longer associated with the original subject. After 391 AD, the Cybelian faith suffered official suppression through the edicts of Emperor Theodosius. The important Cybelian Phrygianum temple on Vatican Hill was subsequently incorporated into the urban development plan for the area. In 1506, when Pope Julius II began construction of the new St. Peter's Basilica, excavations led to a startling discovery. What later Vatican archaeological reports, specifically from the 1951 publication titled Esplorazioni sotto la confezione di San Pietro, described as layers of pre-Christian worship deep within the hillside strata. Notably, the report detailed this issue and proceeded with an in-depth analysis. A common and widely accepted view asserts that St. Peter's Basilica is located on Vatican Hill, as this is the traditional site believed to be St. Peter's final resting place. And indeed, this is a well-founded tradition, documented transparently and in detail. However, the existence of another, competing sanctuary on the very same hill is often explained by the high density of religious sites in ancient Rome, where sacred areas frequently intersected and overlapped. Yet, from a geographical perspective, this story becomes far more complex and difficult to explain. The Phrygianum sanctuary was not merely located near St. Peter's area. More astonishingly, the northern transept of the basilica directly encompassed the very site of the Phrygianum. Furthermore, the distinctive theological language of the rite it replaced is also remarkable. It was expiatory blood bringing regeneration through death. Eternal life granted to the initiated was not merely parallel to Christian baptismal theology. It was structurally identical, used the same vocabulary, promised the same outcome, and was even performed on the very same hill. Historians of late ancient religion, such as Ramsay MacMullen, have made a compelling argument. Christian sacred sites were not randomly built near pagan temples. On the contrary, they were erected directly on those foundations because the site was already recognized as a place where the divine was intimately present. What was truly being asserted here was supreme ownership, far transcending the mere concept of real estate. The blood was washed away, the inscriptions chiseled out, and the great edifice slowly rose. For the next 15 centuries, the hill steadfastly kept its secret, hidden beneath the weight of all the structures piled upon it. Let's explore the unique Scythian hemp ritual, which took place around 450 BC. The Greek historian Herodotus once described a ritual so strange as to be unbelievable, leading scholars for 2,400 years to dismiss it as a wild, untrue tale. According to his historical accounts, Scythian warriors would erect small felt tents over heated stones, then sprinkle hemp seeds onto them, and then enter the tents to inhale the rising vapor. And, as he recounted, they would utter cries of delight and ecstasy within this unique steam bath environment. Notably, this ritual was the purification rite they performed after each burial. The description of this ritual was incredibly specific and full of detail. Yet, for nearly 100 generations of classical scholars, this story was dismissed, regarded as one of Herodotus's famous wild anecdotes about the barbarian tribes living at the edge of their known world. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that a major turning point occurred when the Soviet archaeologist Sergei Ivanovich Rudenko excavated a series of frozen burial mounds in the Altai Mountains and found exactly what Herodotus had described. The Pazyryk burial mounds in southern Siberia, excavated by Rudenko from 1947 to 1954 and published in English as Frozen Tombs of Siberia in 1970, are among the most extraordinary archaeological sites in the world. The permafrost preserved not only bones and metal, but also textiles, food, wooden artifacts, and organic materials that would have completely decomposed under less favorable conditions. Inside many of the burial chambers, Rudenko found bronze cauldrons containing carbonized hemp seeds and heated stones. He found felt fragments consistent with the tent structures that Herodotus had described. He found tent pole structures in at least 6 separate mound excavations. Cannabis, pollen, and fibers were confirmed through laboratory analysis. The dates match. The Pazyryk culture, dated to approximately 500 to 300 BCE using dendrochronology, dating the tree rings of the wooden burial chambers, providing physical evidence contemporary with, or slightly predating Herodotus's accounts. He wasn't describing something he'd heard about from a confused traveler. He was describing in precise technical detail a practice actively underway during his lifetime. This specific method warrants closer examination. The Scythians used hemp seeds, not the resin-rich flower clusters that produce a more potent effect. They placed them on heated stones to release volatile compounds as vapor. This is a technically sophisticated delivery method. It's effective and controllable, requiring no plant processing beyond harvesting. It reflects the kind of empirical knowledge accumulated over generations of practice, rather than accidental discovery. Paleobotanist Andrew Sherratt, in his 1995 analysis of psychoactive plant use in prehistoric Eurasia, argued that this level of sophistication indicates a ritual tradition centuries older than the Pazyryk tombs themselves, a tradition that Herodotus happened to observe and record at a specific point in its long history. Mainstream academia now accepts the Scythian hemp ritual as confirmed. Scholarly consensus shifted after the physical evidence became undeniable. Scholars now view the vapor bath ritual as a funerary purification rite, a method of grief management and spiritual transformation using cannabis vapor in a controlled, ritualistic setting. In retrospect, it was a sophisticated, portable technology for inducing a specific psychological state, deployed at a time of maximum emotional vulnerability. It required no permanent infrastructure and left no obvious trace. But the 40-year gap between Rudenko's 1954 excavations and academia's widespread acceptance of their significance is worth pondering. The physical evidence was there in the published accounts. Hemp seeds lay in the cauldrons, and for 4 decades the mainstream response from classical academia was to treat Herodotus's account as essentially unverified. The Scythians left no writing system. Their ritual knowledge was passed down orally and lost with the culture what Herodotus had preserved. The specific technical description of felt tents, heated stones, and hemp seeds was the only written record that survived, and the clear instinct was to disbelieve it. Some researchers suggest the opposition wasn't entirely academic, a confirmed record of a sophisticated ancient pharmacological ritual tradition, one that had been active, refined over generations, and disseminated across a continent-spanning nomadic culture, complicated the human progress narrative in uncomfortable ways. Herodotus was right. He was right in every specific detail. The felt, the stones, the seeds, the howling. He saw it. He recorded it. And for 2,400 years, those who came after him decided that perhaps he hadn't. The peat cutters who found the body in the bog on May 8, 1950, outside Silkeborg, Denmark, stopped work and called the police. He looked, they said, as if he had just died. His face was so perfectly preserved that stubble remained on his jaw, his closed eyes still soft, leading responding officers to assume they were looking at a murder victim from a few weeks prior. A startling forensic examination revealed the truth. This man had passed away approximately 2,400 years ago. His true identity remains a mystery, unknown to anyone, so he was named after the very place he was discovered. We know him as the Tolland Man, a victim of execution by hanging, The clearest evidence is the leather noose, still intact and tightly cinched around his neck. That fatal knot remained perfectly preserved, without any loosening. Afterward, his body was gently laid into the water, resting on its side. His eyes were closed, creating the impression that a caring hand had gently tucked him in for his eternal sleep. His case was not an isolated incident, but part of a chilling pattern. Archaeologist P.V. Globe meticulously cataloged over 160 bog bodies found across Denmark. His groundbreaking work, titled The Bog People, was published in 1969, marking a significant milestone. Subsequent surveys, conducted extensively across peat bogs in Denmark, England, Ireland, Germany, and the Netherlands, brought the total number of recorded cases to over 500. When these 500 cases were analyzed collectively, they revealed a startling truth. These were not random acts of violence, but a deliberately repeated formula. The Tolland man was executed by hanging. As for the Graubala man, dating from approximately 310 to 55 BC, discovered in a bog in central Denmark, he suffered a deep cut to his neck, so severe that the wound nearly reached his cervical spine. Remarkably, there were no defensive wounds, nor any signs indicating a struggle. Another case is the Lindo man, found in 1984 at Lindo Moss in Cheshire, England, considered one of the most iconic and prominent examples. He was struck twice on the skull with a blunt object, strangled with a sinew cord, breaking a cervical vertebra, and had his throat cut. 3 distinct methods of killing, applied to one person in a deliberate sequence. Forensic analysts Ian Stead, J.B. Bork, and Don Brothwell, in their 1986 study Lindo Man, The Body in the Bog, described this triple death as ritualistic, not chaotic. The difference between a murder staged for ritualistic purpose and one committed in anger. Isotopic analysis of nitrogen levels in bones and teeth from multiple specimens consistently showed elevated markers of high protein. This was not the diet of high-status individuals. These were not slaves. These were not criminals drawn from the lowest strata of society. They ate like nobility in the years leading up to their deaths. Miranda Oldhouse Green from Cardiff University, in her 2001 study Dying for the Gods, documented the combination of high status, deliberate selection, killing by multiple complex methods, and careful post-mortem placement. Sometimes on a bed of birch branches, sometimes face down in the water, always with a specific orientation. Lindo Man's stomach contents added another detail. His last meal consisted of burnt, unleavened bread made from several types of grain. The bread contained mistletoe pollen. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, specifically described mistletoe as sacred in Druid rituals, cut with a golden sickle, never allowed to touch the ground. Mistletoe in the last meal of a man killed 3 times over, with no defensive wounds, found in the bogs of northern England. Something was being communicated. The problem is that the culture communicating it left no written language. Scholars connect the triple death pattern to later medieval Irish texts, including the Tógéil Brúdna da Durga. This describes the ritual killing of a sacred king by 3 simultaneous methods as a requirement of the offering's completeness. Those texts were written roughly 1,000 years after the bog bodies were deposited. The fact that they describe the same technical procedure is either a remarkable coincidence or evidence of a ritual tradition, transmitted through oral culture for a millennium before anyone wrote it down. What no one recorded in any surviving text from any ancient Northern European source is the ceremony itself. Julius Caesar and Tacitus both describe Celtic and Germanic sacrifice in general terms. Neither specifies the triple death formula. Neither mentions the bogs as sacred sites. The knowledge of why these specific people were killed in this specific way, in this specific place, died with the priests who performed it, replaced eventually by a Christianity that had no reason to preserve what it had spent centuries suppressing. The bog kept the bodies. Everything else is silence. The Carthaginian Tophet. When Rome destroyed Carthage in 146 BCE, the general Scipio Aemilianus stood and watched the city burn for 17 days. Ancient sources tell us he wept not from regret, but from the recognition that all great cities eventually fall, including his own. The Romans were thorough in their destruction. Libraries burned, the harbor was demolished. The fields were supposedly salted. But in a walled precinct behind the temple quarter of Carthage, in a neighborhood now called Salambo in modern Tunis, the ground held something the Romans didn't touch, a chilling truth they might never have fully grasped. Imagine 20,000 urns, each a silent testament, interred in shallow graves, holding the cremated remains of children, a grim collection spanning 6 continuous centuries. For 2 millennia, these silent relics lay undisturbed, awaiting discovery and examination. The archaeological site known as the Tophet at Salambo first saw excavation efforts commence in 1921. However, it was Lawrence Steger from Harvard who, throughout the 1970s and 80s, undertook the rigorous archaeological investigation that definitively unveiled its true character. His initial findings appeared in the 1980 Bulletin of the American Schools of Oriental Research, with further elaborations in later publications. Within the excavated portions of the sanctuary, a mere fraction of the entire complex, Steger unearthed over 20,000 burial urns, chronologically spanning an uninterrupted period from roughly 800 BCE to 146 BCE. This site saw continuous use for 6 centuries. The urns predominantly held the cremated remains of children under 3 years old, with a notable percentage exhibiting bone development consistent with gestational or neonatal stages, indicating infants and even unborn fetuses. From the 1970s to the 2000s, a prevailing revisionist theory suggested the Tophet was merely a children's cemetery for natural deaths, a burial ground for infant mortality in a society plagued by high childhood death rates. Such an interpretation wasn't entirely unfounded. Indeed, infant mortality rates in the ancient world were tragically high. Therefore, a specific burial ground for young children who perished prematurely wouldn't, at first glance, seem unusual. However, a pivotal shift occurred in 2011 when a team, spearheaded by Josephine Quinn, published their groundbreaking isotopic analysis of Tophet specimens in the journal PLOS ONE. The unique chemical makeup of tooth enamel serves as an indelible record, revealing an individual's geographical origins during their formative years, essentially capturing the mineral signature of their childhood water supply. The collective findings unequivocally demonstrated that the vast majority of these victims were local-born children from Carthaginian families. These were not enslaved individuals, nor foreign outsiders, nor solely the offspring of the impoverished and marginalized, but rather the children of Carthage's own citizenry, representing every stratum of society. Throughout those 6 centuries, stele unearthed from the Tophet bear distinct dedicatory inscriptions. Translated from Punic, these inscriptions consistently appear as variations of a gift to Baal Haman or a vow to Tanit, the revered Carthaginian mother goddess. Crucially, the terminology employed is sacrificial in nature. It conspicuously lacks any expression of sorrow or mourning. Ancient historians like Diodorus Siculus and Plutarch, alongside early Christian author Tertullian, all documented the practice known as molk, and their core descriptions have now been substantially corroborated by archaeological evidence. During periods of severe civic crisis, children were presented to the deity as the ultimate act of propitiation, an offering made by families who perceived it as a profound devotional sacrifice. Consequently, the prevailing academic consensus now largely acknowledges that child sacrifice indeed took place at the Tophet, that it was a state-sanctioned practice spanning 6 centuries, and that the earlier revisionist theory of a mere burial ground has been decisively disproven by the isotopic analysis.
Bạn có bao giờ tự hỏi, liệu quy mô và thời gian của một nghi lễ có thực sự phơi bày bản chất thần học sâu xa hay chỉ là vỏ bọc cho những điều kinh hoàng? Thần Baal Hamon, một vị thần cổ xưa, không chỉ đòi hỏi những lễ vật thông thường, Ngài yêu cầu sự hy sinh tột cùng, chính là báu vật vô giá nhất mà mỗi gia đình trân quý. Tuy nhiên, nhà sử học Josephine Quinn trong tác phẩm đột phá In Search of the Phoenicians 2018 đã mạnh dạn đặt ra một nghi vấn hoàn toàn khác, thách thức mọi giả định. Điều gì đã thúc đẩy giới học giả hiện đại suốt 5 thế kỷ ròng miệt mài tìm kiếm một lý giải khác cho sự tồn tại của hơn 20.000 chiếc bình tro cốt bí ẩn này? Lý do nào khiến cho cách diễn giải mang tính xét lại này vẫn cứ tồn tại bền bỉ, bất chấp những bằng chứng đối lập? Suốt 3 thập kỷ qua, đối mặt với vô số bằng chứng phản bác ngày càng chồng chất, bà Queen kiên quyết khẳng định rằng lời giải đáp thực sự nằm ở sự gần gũi về mặt văn hóa. Chúng ta dễ dàng chấp nhận những nghi lễ hiến tế của người Aztec bởi vì họ được coi là xa lạ, thuộc về thời kỳ tiền Columbus, không phải phương Tây, và nằm ngoài dòng chảy văn minh mà chúng ta tự nhận. Ngược lại, chúng ta thường nhìn nhận Carthage như một nền văn minh Semitic phát triển mạnh mẽ ở Địa Trung Hải và nổi bật về thương mại. Đế chế này đã thiết lập nhiều thuộc địa trải dài khắp khu vực phía Tây Địa Trung Hải. Carthage từng là đối thủ đáng gờm, cạnh tranh trực tiếp với các cường quốc như La Mã và Hy Lạp. Nói một cách thực tế, Carthage chính là một láng giềng gần gũi với nền văn minh mà chúng ta tin rằng mình có nguồn gốc từ đó, và chính Queen đã đưa ra giả thuyết rằng đây chính là nguyên nhân sâu xa khiến sự phủ nhận này kéo dài dài dẳng đến vậy. Một số sự thật có vẻ dễ bị che giấu hơn những sự thật khác, không phải bởi đất cát mà bởi chính sự đồng thuận trong giới học thuật, nơi định đoạt những gì được phép công bố từ lòng đất. Trong nghi lễ lửa mới, một sự kiện trọng đại diễn ra mỗi 52 năm, tất cả mọi ngọn lửa trên khắp đế chế Aztec đều phải được dập tắt hoàn toàn. Đây không phải là một phép ẩn dụ, theo đúng nghĩa đen, từ bếp lửa gia đình, ngọn đuốc soi đường cho đến lư hương trong các đền thờ linh thiêng, tất cả đều bị dập tắt vào lúc hoàng hôn tại mọi thành phố, trên khắp một nền văn minh với hàng triệu cư dân. Mọi người dân đều leo lên mái nhà của mình, hướng mắt về phía bầu trời đêm, chờ đợi một dấu hiệu. Những phụ nữ đang mang thai bị che mặt bằng lá magi và phải ở yên trong nhà, bởi một niềm tin kinh hoàng rằng nếu ngọn lửa mới không được thắp lên, họ sẽ hóa thành quái vật và nuốt chửng chính chồng mình. Trẻ nhỏ bị véo liên tục để đảm bảo chúng không ngủ gật, vì có lời đồn rằng nếu chúng chìm vào giấc ngủ trong đêm thiêng liêng này, chúng sẽ biến thành những con chuột. Mọi vật dụng gia đình đều bị đập phá tan tành, những món đồ gốm cũ kỹ cũng không thoát khỏi số phận bị nghiền nát. And on a hilltop south of the capital, a priest cut open the chest of a living man, a warrior chosen for his physical perfection, and attempted to make fire from the incision with a wooden drill. If the fire caught, the world would continue. If not, the sky would fall, and star demons called Tsitsimime would descend to devour every living thing on earth. This was not a metaphor. This was policy. The ritual was called Toxumulpili, the binding of the years, and it stemmed from the structure of the Aztec calendar system. The Aztec world operated on two simultaneous cycles, a 365-day solar calendar called Xupohualli, and a 260-day ritual calendar called Tonalpohualli. Every 18,980 days, or 52 years, these two cycles completed simultaneously, returning to their common starting point, the calendar round. At that point, the Aztec cosmological system entered a zone of maximum instability. The current world, the fifth sun, had been created and destroyed 4 times before. There was no guarantee it would survive the completion of another cycle. Alfonso Caso's 1927 calendar correlation study determined the last new fire ceremony before the conquest period took place in November 1507. The Codex Borbonicus, one of the few surviving pre-Columbian Aztec manuscripts, illustrates the Toxumulpili sequence across several pages. The extinguishing of fires, the procession of priests to the Hill of the Star at Huizactlan, now Cerro de la Estrella, south of Tenochtitlan. The astronomical observation of the Pleiades constellation at midnight, known as Tianquizli, passing the meridian. If the star cluster passed at the correct time, the calendar had held firm, and fire could be made. Bernardino de Sahagun's Florentine Codex describes the rest in vivid detail. It was like a production schedule, the sacrificial victim dressed in the regalia of the fire god Xutecuhtli đã bị giết trên đồi. Lửa được đốt trong khoang ngực mở. Khi nó bùng lên, những người chạy mang nó đầu tiên đến đền lớn ở Tenochtitlan. Sau đó bằng cách rước đuốc khắp đế chế, cuộc rước đuốc phải đến mọi thành phố, mọi thị trấn, mọi bếp lửa gia đình trước bình minh. Nó bao phủ hàng trăm km chỉ trong một đêm. Các nghiên cứu khảo cổ học của UNAM về Cerro de la Estrella do nhóm của Eduardo Matos Moctezuma dẫn đầu vào những năm 1990 đã xác nhận các vật phẩm cúng tế bị đốt cháy và các sửa đổi kiến trúc tại địa điểm phù hợp với việc sử dụng nghi lễ định kỳ, quy mô lớn. Cách giải thích chủ đạo coi Tochumolpili là biểu hiện rõ nét của nỗi lo âu vũ trụ của người Aztec, một nền văn minh thực sự được tổ chức dựa trên tiền đề rằng thế giới rất mong manh, và rằng hành động của con người, đặc biệt là sự hy sinh và sự chính xác trong nghi lễ, là điều đã giữ cho nó nguyên vẹn. Chu kỳ 52 năm vừa mang tính thần học, vừa mang tính chính trị. Nó tập trung quyền lực đế quốc vào thời điểm vũ trụ dễ bị tổn thương, với Tlatoani là người trung gian không thể thiếu giữa người dân và sự hủy diệt tiềm tàng. Nhưng khía cạnh thiên văn học là phần khiến ngay cả cách đọc thẳng thắn nhất cũng phải băn khoăn. Nghi lễ yêu cầu một kết quả quan sát cụ thể. Chòm sao thất nữ phải đi qua kinh tuyến vào khoảng nửa đêm của đêm chính xác nhận rằng lịch mặt trời đã không lệch khỏi thực tế thiên văn. Do đó, Tonopohuke, tầng lớp thầy tế chuyên trách lịch, phải chịu một áp lực công khai. Đó là một nghĩa vụ có thể kiểm chứng. Cứ 52 năm một lần, lịch của họ phải khớp với các vì sao. Bất kỳ sự sai lệch nào cũng sẽ được mọi người trên mọi mái nhà trong đế chế nhìn thấy đồng thời. Khi các nhà truyền giáo dòng Francisco đến sau cuộc chinh phục, họ đã xác định việc phá hủy các ghi chép quan sát tích lũy của Tanopuque là công cụ hiệu quả nhất để phá vỡ niềm tin vũ trụ của người Aztec. Nghiên cứu năm 1933 của Robert Ricard, cuộc chinh phục tinh thần Mexico, ghi lại điều này như một chính sách thuộc địa chính thức. Đến năm 1525, các ghi chép lịch đã bị phá hủy, không phải vì chúng sai, mà vì chúng có vai trò nền tảng. Nếu không có chúng, chu kỳ 52 năm không thể được xác minh nữa.
Without verification, the priest could no longer prove the sky wasn't falling. And without that proof, the world the ceremony had held together for centuries began quietly to end. The festival of the flayed god. The festival lasts 20 days. On the first day, the priests slit the skin of a sacrificial victim from neck to heel, remove it from the body in a single piece, and put it on. Then they walk through the city for 20 days wearing the skin while it rots. They receive offerings and offer blessings. They represent the god. When the skin has finally decomposed past the point of wearability, when the Mesoamerican heat and humidity have done their work, what remains is taken to a sacred cave and buried. The god who wears skin dies and rises renewed, like the earth that sheds its old surface and reveals the new growth beneath. For 5 centuries, Western scholarship treated this as symbolic exaggeration. In 2019, archaeologists found the cave. The god is Xipe Totec, our lord, the flayed one, and he was not a minor deity. He was one of the 4 creator gods in the Aztec cosmological system, responsible for spring renewal, agricultural fertility, and the regeneration of the earth's skin at the turn of the growing season. His festival, Tlacaxipehualistli, fell in the 2nd month of the Aztec solar calendar, approximately late February or early March, the end of the dry season, the moment when the earth's brown surface was about to be replaced by green. The symbolism was not abstract. The priest wearing a dead man's skin was the earth wearing its old season, about to shed it. The timing was agricultural precision encoded in flesh. The 2019 excavation at Indachchian Tehuacan in Puebla, Mexico, under the direction of archaeologist Nira Alvarado Vieira from INA, a remarkable archaeological discovery has been made. The research team unearthed 3 skull racks, along with over 150 skull fragments and a unique stone vessel. Among these, a particular Teotihuacli contained human skull fragments, distinguished by an unmistakable, characteristic perforation style. This discovery perfectly matches the detailed descriptions recorded in Sahagun's Florentine Codex. This ritual involved the display of flayed skulls, a haunting practice. The presence of this stone vessel, a rare artifact, had been noted in Aztec sources. However, many had previously dismissed it, believing it to be merely a metaphor or an exaggeration. Notably, these are not ordinary ceramic statues of Xiutec. In fact, they are among the most common types of Aztec artifacts, appearing in museum collections worldwide. To identify them, there are 2 specific, unmistakable characteristics. First, a second face is clearly visible beneath the pulled-back skin mask. Second, sleeve-like extensions, which are actually the victim's hands, dangle from the priest's wrists like extra fingers. These statues date from approximately 900 AD until the conquest in 1521. For 6 continuous centuries, this same iconography was depicted and widely distributed across Oaxaca, the Gulf Coast, Maya sites, and the heart of the Aztec Empire. Clearly, this was not merely a local cult. Rather, it was a profound theological tradition, deeply rooted in Mesoamerica. Sahagun's sources provided detailed physiological descriptions of the 20-day period of wearing the skin, information that even his Franciscan editors could not entirely suppress. In hot, humid conditions, the skin would begin to decompose within days, producing a distinctive odor. This scent in itself was considered sacred. It was the smell of transformation, of the old making way for the new. The priests wearing the skin were not merely performing a theatrical display. Rather, according to the Aztec worldview, they were literally reenacting the Earth's seasonal mechanisms. The dominant interpretation has long recognized Tlacaipehualistli as a well-documented agricultural fertility ritual, and now this has been physically confirmed by the excavation at Teotihuacan. The act of flaying was understood to have profound and precise cosmological significance. The dead skin symbolized the dry season. The priest wearing it represented the moment of transition, and the 20 days of wearing reflected the Earth's transformative phase before the rainy season. In Aztec theology, this was explained consistently and carefully. However, the Spanish colonial authorities specifically targeted Xipe Totec temples for destruction from an early stage, standing out significantly from most contemporary Aztec religious architecture. This revealed a truth that missionaries had quickly come to realize. A simplistic view of agricultural symbolism inadvertently diminished its profound meaning. A divine being descending to earth, taking on human form, undergoing a cycle of death and decomposition. And it was through that incarnation, that sacrifice, that rebirth, a new beginning for the entire world, was brought forth. This was not merely a simple agricultural metaphor, but a confrontational, challenging doctrine of salvation. A contrasting interpretation of how death could transform into life, about the profound meaning of the sacred body, and about the true nature of resurrection. The Franciscan friars quickly identified a formidable theological adversary, and upon discovering it, they did not hesitate to decisively target it. What was astonishing was that the temple in Tehuacan had been buried, not by natural erosion, but by a deliberate act of filling it with earth and rubble. This entire process was carried out in a single event. This perfectly aligns with a deliberate act of concealment. One possibility is that it was done by the Spanish oppressors, or it could have been by the Aztec priests themselves, who foresaw the impending future and decided to hide what they could before it arrived. The cave where the skin was buried after 20 days. The stone jar containing skulls used in rituals. 22 years ago, we didn't know either of those things existed, beyond the records. In 2019, one of them appeared in Puebla, just as the sources had indicated. The question worth pondering is, how many more things are still waiting? And exactly what will they confirm when we open them? 10 rituals, 10 cultures. From a poisoned cup in Greece to a frozen child on an Andean peak, from a blood pit on Vatican Hill to a 20-day vigil in a rotting skin on the streets of Tenochtitlan, and throughout all of it, a connecting thread that no textbook directly names. Every ritual on this list has been documented. The truth is revealed not only through witness accounts, but is also strongly corroborated by archaeological findings, meticulous forensic chemical analysis, and, most importantly, by the bodies themselves. Undeniable evidence. However, what's astonishing is that, in every instance, some power has consistently gone to great lengths to erase and conceal this truth. The mighty Roman Empire did not hesitate to completely burn down Necromantium, a deliberate act of destruction. The Spanish cruelly melted down precious ancient manuscripts, reducing them to inert matter and obliterating millennia of knowledge. By order of Theodosius, agents used chisels to ruthlessly deface and destroy ancient carvings on Vatican Hill, an act of cultural vandalism. Surprisingly, European scholars were quick to dismiss the bodies found in the bogs, attributing them solely to random acts of violence and overlooking other possibilities. For 24 centuries, Herodotus has stood as a towering figure, a great storyteller, and a historical witness across time. For 500 years, academic consensus has focused on studying 20,000 Carthaginian urns, an immense body of evidence. However, it's noteworthy that they went to great lengths to justify their interpretations, avoiding a true confrontation with what was actually contained within those urns. It cannot be denied that the orthodox explanations for each of these rituals are well-founded and accurate. These encompass the convergence of religious psychology, calculated political dramas, and profound agricultural symbolism. Or rituals related to pharmacology, possessing healing or perception-altering properties. In reality, these are genuine and undeniable explanatory frameworks. They genuinely offer explanations for real historical phenomena and events. The mighty Aztec state operated based on a genuine and profound cosmological belief system, shaping every aspect of life. The ancient Greek priesthood, who wielded spiritual power, they engaged in genuinely psychological practices that had a profound impact on the community. Inca rituals demonstrated a sincere and profound theological concern, going beyond mere external forms. However, the orthodox argument remains incomplete and lacking. This is because it merely describes surface mechanisms, overlooking deeper meanings. They resolutely reject all rules, forging their own path to achieve the ultimate goal. The core commonality of these 10 rituals is an unshakable, steadfast belief. However, most of us today have lost that unwavering belief, that the thin line separating the living and the dead, between mortals and the spirit world, is not an impenetrable solid wall, but merely a permeable membrane. And the miraculous thing is, it can be entirely crossed if one possesses precise knowledge, a perfect and precise combination, a groundbreaking, bold, and righteous act, executed at the pivotal moment, provided you achieve absolute precision and are brave enough to pursue it to the very end. That steadfast belief became a potential threat to all powerful empires that followed. A ritual is not suppressed because it is ineffective, but because it actually works, or at least because the vast majority believe it possesses power. And for the purpose of maintaining political power, this is entirely equivalent to it actually working. The architects who created these rituals were not primitives fumbling their way towards civilization. They were master engineers of the threshold, those who held the key to transcending all limits. It's a little-known truth that they held profound secrets about the human mind. This knowledge spanned from ancient pharmacology to the complex psychology of death and transformation. What's astonishing is that only today, with the remarkable advancements in modern chemistry and cognitive science, are we just beginning to explore and quantify these very things. Yet their sophisticated methods were buried, sometimes beneath the dust of time in ruins, sometimes forbidden by harsh laws, or even concealed by an uncomfortable 5-century-long academic consensus, which in no way proves their failure. If you followed along this far, you've likely sensed deep down that something isn't quite right, that mainstream narratives still leave too many unanswered questions without satisfactory explanations. And this channel was created precisely for those minds that constantly ponder with this kind of thinking. Not baseless conspiracy theories, but a logical, rigorous, and well-founded way of thinking. These are people who, when faced with an ancient inscription, don't just look, but ask profound questions. Not simply, what happened here? But, who had the power to decide that we shouldn't know this truth? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the mysteries still hidden within our treasury of knowledge. Join us on a journey of discovery to see the astonishing depth of these things. Don't hesitate to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Share about a ritual from this list that you find most difficult to explain. Present your arguments, and let's see the interesting insights you bring. For those who directly practice them, these rituals are not superstition, but an obvious part of the truth. They are not ostentatious displays, nor barbaric acts, but the very essence of truth. Let's explore the mysteries awaiting at the threshold of human experience, and the unimaginable price we must pay to reach it. It wasn't the traditional rituals that were truly abolished. Instead, it was the firm belief in the existence of that threshold, and the ability to cross it. Irrefutable evidence still remains. From ancient skeletons and mysterious chemical traces to stone vessels found deep within caves. This reality has existed for millennia. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join us in continuing to seek answers to these challenging why questions.